Welcome to our webinar on pricing molding in Canada. And I'm going to go right into our Frame Ready program to get us started. And the first thing I want to talk about on here is there are two different ways for you to update your vendors. And it's really important that in Canada, you know both of these methods. We're going to go down to the Update Vendor Pricing button. And when you click on that, this is the screen that you're familiar with. When you do the vendor updates on this screen under the My Vendors tab, what this is going to do is it's going to update all of the, and I'm going to click on one of them here so you can see it. It's going to take a look for the molding number in your Frame Ready program, find that molding number, and it's going to update the wholesale cost for length, chop, and join. Now, if you have manually entered in molding numbers, it won't update them unless you match the item exactly and you've entered in the vendor ID number, but that's a rare case that it's going to do that, or that you're going to do that. So the most important thing to know is that it's the item number that's being updated and the length, chop, and join wholesale costs are being updated. For Canada, if the supplier has a matrix, it's also going to import this code table that is in there. And this is the text saying that this is the code table that is associated with this particular molding. However, it is not bringing in the chart for that molding. That's in a different update. So we're going to go to that one next. And over on the far right-hand side of the screen, there's an orange or salmon color tab, same color as the work order basically. And this is the vendor codes tab. So that when it's time for you to update all of the vendor code matrix pricing that the supplier has, and that's on one of those printed charts that they have saying that for 18 United inches, the join retail price is going to be X dollars. And that's what this chart is. In order to update it, you'll see either words that are underlined or a button in the top left-hand corner, and you're going to click on that and it will update all of the vendors in this list. Not just the ones that you use, but it will update all of them. And I would suggest that you would want to do this at least once a month. Come in here. You can also go and click on the underlined date and it'll sort the oldest to the newest ones. If you click on the underlined date, it will sort the oldest ones to the top. The newest updates are at the bottom, or you can click on the date again to have the most recent updates at the top of the list. And you can see that there's generally about one a month. So you want to come in, pick a date once a month, first of the month, last of the month, and update this retail price chart. If you are pricing by join, then that's the chart that you should be using. So if you are using the join pricing and they do not supply a join wholesale cost, use the vendor code tables. However, if the supplier that you are working with, and I'm going to go into the Add Canadian chart here, if that supplier does have wholesale costs for length, chop, and join, then you can price by the markup formula rather than pricing by the vendor matrix. So you have a couple of choices there, more than one, but making sure everything is up to date is the most important thing. So make sure that you do both of those updates if you are using the matrix pricing from the supplier. So we've covered out how to update it in the price codes file. There are two other places where you can update those matrix codes. If you are in the price codes file itself and you happen to be looking at a particular molding and it has a code, right over here on the right-hand side under the code pricing, then you can actually click on the button right here where it says Update Vendor Codes, and that's going to do the same thing that you saw on the main menu under Update Vendor Pricing. Or you can go to the Code Tables, and in here you can also click the button that says Update Vendor Codes. Now, if you have accidentally clicked on that and you don't use them, you will notice that in your list you have a whole pile of extra codes now, and these are all those Canadian codes for the matrix. If you need to have them removed, give our office a call and let us know that you need to have them removed. We'll help you remove them safely so that you don't remove the codes that you are actually using. Okay, and there's too many to delete one at a time. So those are the three different areas where you can update the code tables from the suppliers. So we're ready now to go into one of our first polls that we have. And I'm just going to ask Chrissy to go ahead and give us that first poll.
All right, sounds good.
So Chrissy, can you see that on my screen? Oh.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
How do you price molding? Use supplier matrix, use supplier matrix but adjust it, or use length pricing?
Super.
We're just about 100% complete.
Okay, and then we'll go and take a look at the results on that poll. And that looks great. So the majority of people are using the length pricing, but there are a number of people that are using the supplier matrix and some that are actually adjusting the matrix. And that's a great idea to do that, because there's no one pricing formula that's going to work for everyone. Super. So let's go back into FrameReady. And when we go back into FrameReady, now I want to take a look, and the big question is, how do you know which pricing you are using for your molding items? And a lot of people aren't sure, so we want to show you how to check that. In the price codes file, and I've marked a few of the items in here so that we can take a look at them, but even just going into this list view, you can see that this is the code table for the matrix to use. But if you don't see an X here, that means that you are not using it. The code may be there, but unless there's an X, you are not using it. And if I go and take a look at the records that I've marked, I've got two samples here, this one that is not using the code table and this one that is using the code table. So if I click on the molding record here, it looks normal. You don't see any writing up at the top. But if I go to the next record on the list, which is using the code table, you will see that it tells you a code is being used to price this formula. And if you go to the far right-hand side, you'll see that there is the check mark in that box. If you decide that you don't want to price with them, then you need to click on the button on the right-hand side, and you can either do it for one selected vendor or for all of them. And what would happen is when you click on that button, you're going to get a little dialog box that comes up that says you can either enable it and turn it on or disable it and turn it off. So that's a great way for you to check to see which of the pricing systems you are using. If I just going to check my note here. Okay, yeah, that was everything I needed to cover there. So other things that you need to know, if I go back to my list, is the suppliers that we have in Canada, the majority of them do not supply us with wholesale costs for chop or join. There are only 4 companies right now in Canada that do supply wholesale costs for all 3 of these fields. You do want to check to see if you have those costs available. You can still mark the circles to say that you want to price by length, chop, or join on an individual record, even if there isn't a join wholesale cost, but you need to do it manually. Or when you're doing your vendor updates, if you selected process unattended and all of the new items, or when you're bringing the new items in, if you want them to be joined, you can set them up to be joined at that time. However, you can also go into this button here where it says apply the order type to the group and select to say all of them will be joined. Or you can select just one supplier and say that I want their molding items to be joined, either all of them, or you can select to say just the wood moldings will be joined. Now the catch on this is that if I apply this and there isn't a wholesale cost in the join field, it will not mark the circle. In that case, we would need to use the replace command to move that from length to join. So you can look that up on our online help on how to use the replace command, or contact one of the tech support people to see how to do that. Okay, boy, I wish I could just pause it right now, Chrissy. Yeah, I am going to pause for a second, see if that works. And I think it's paused it. Oh, that was her question. Okay. Now, if you happen to be pricing by length and you decide that on the work order you want to order by join, you can do that. We're going to go to the work order screen. And on the work order screen, underneath the molding item, you can click on the underlined word frame 1, and you'll see that this item is being priced by a code table. And I've identified that I wanted to price it by join. But if I decided that I wanted to price it by length, then I can go over to the modify button and change that to length or to chop, or whichever way I want to order it. In some cases, making this change will affect your pricing. In some cases, it will not. If you are ordering or pricing it right now by the matrix, then changing it to the length is not going to change the retail price. However, if I have it set to be ordered as length and I'm using the supplier, if I have it priced to order as join and I decided to change it as length and I had a wholesale cost in the join, then yes, it will change it. But if I'm using the code table for the supplier, it will not change it. Going back to our price codes file, taking a look. Why is there no join wholesale cost on most of the suppliers in Canada? And that's something that I was curious about, and I wanted to find out about that. So I did a little bit of research, and what I found out here is that if we take a look here, most of them will not have a join wholesale cost in them. However, the reason for that is because the price varies. This wholesale cost for length is stable. It doesn't matter what the footage is that you order, it isn't going to change. However, when you take a look at the join and you look at the supplier chart, what I did was I went through and took a look at the cost and divided it by the footage and found out that the price changes depending on the amount of footage that you order. So that's why they aren't able to supply us with one number that can fit into that box, because it changes based on the size of the frame that you're ordering. Now, if we go a little further in depth, we can also take a look at, and I did go further in depth, I wanted to see exactly what was happening. So here's some of the United Inch measurements that we have in Frame Ready, and here is the join retail price that the supplier has given us in this column. I picked one particular molding based on that width, what is the footage that was needed in order to purchase or create that frame. And then when you take that amount and divide it by the join wholesale cost, you get the cost, the retail price per foot. And we know that the retail price per foot, or the retail amount on that chart, is 2 times the cost. So now I've divided it by 2, and here is the cost per foot on this one particular frame. And you'll notice that it starts out at $15 in a small size, but as it goes up, it changes up to $19. I had always believed that what was happening really was that it was going to start out at a higher amount, which it does on this particular Larson frame, and then it goes down to a lower cost per foot because you're ordering more footage. So that made sense to me at the time. However, when I went and explored a little bit more, and this time I took 2 items that have the exact same code, but they have different widths in them, which means, of course, that they're going to be ordering different footage. And I wanted to take a look and see what the cost per foot was going to be like on those, and it is different. But then again, it's based on the width of the molding. So when you're looking at that, this could be a more ornate frame, it could be harder to cut. So we don't know the logic of why certain items have the code that they do, but there is some logic behind them. And if you're pricing it out by join and you're ordering it by join, my suggestion is that you would use the supplier matrix chart that they have supplied to you, because that's going to give you the most accurate retail price based on the cost that they are charging you. Of course, you definitely want to go back and check and find out when your bill comes in, how much did it cost you? How much did you charge the customer? Are you making the profit that you need to make? So whether or not there is an amount in the join cost field, or you're using the code table field and that they have supplied to you, you want to check to see, are you covering your costs? Because you may need to increase this amount if you are not making enough profit based on the area that you are in. And there is no way that one chart could possibly, or even one markup could possibly be the right one for someone who's out in British Columbia who has, you know, a high overhead, or somebody who's out in Nova Scotia and doesn't have as much overhead perhaps, or has a lower cost of living there. Again, if you're in Calgary and you are right in a high-end neighborhood, you're going to need to charge more than somebody who's in a discount neighborhood. So these are a great starting point. The same as the markups that we supply you with are a great starting point, but you do need to adjust them to be right for your area. So one of the things that you can do is take a look at what the costs are and compare the two between the code table and the markups to see if you have the choice, which one should you go with. And we're going to do that in just a minute. But first of all, we're going to stop and take a look at our next poll that Chrissy's going to be reading for us. And here we are.
How many molding suppliers do you work with? 1 to 2, 3 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 24, or 25 and more?
And you're probably wondering how many suppliers are there in Canada. And there are actually 28 that I've counted that I would consider to be up to date with us and have given us pricing updates. So it is possible to have that higher one. And I think we're just about done, Chrissy.
Yeah, it looks like we've got everybody that's entered it.
Great, and let's take a look at the results. Okay, so majority of people are using 3 to 9 suppliers, so that's excellent. Keeping it in that manageable range. Some people don't have access to as many suppliers, and some people do have that access. So good to know. Thank you, everyone. So let's go back into Frame Ready. And this time we want to take a look at if you are pricing with the matrix codes, how can you see it in the price codes file? And I did show that to you over here on the right-hand side under the code tab. We can click on the button that says show code and you will be able to see the amount here. Now, if you wanted to see that, actually, you will be able to see it on the right-hand side. There are some places where this code is not going to give you information, and that is on the work order screen. When you're looking in the bottom left-hand corner to see what the cost of the materials are, it will not be able to enter in the wholesale cost from that code table, because that's only a code for the retail price, which is generated up here. So there isn't any way for us to add the cost down here in the bottom left corner. This cost is actually coming from the length wholesale cost that has been entered in here. So that's where that's showing up. And that's where you can see it on the work order screen. The other area that if you are using the matrix, you won't be able to see the amount using the code table is if you are looking at the price comparison screen. And what it will do is it will show you the one for the length that I have up here, but this item is using a code table, so it isn't able to populate those numbers into this part of the screen. And that's the same as on this section as well under the dark blue tab. If you are using the code table, you will not see the prices on the far right-hand side in the blue. You need to click on the orange tab and then click on show codes in order to see them. Now, if you are pricing with the markup in Frame Ready and you've decided that you wanted to use that because you're either ordering by join or you do have a chop or a join wholesale cost, then as I mentioned before, this is a great place for you to get started. You can use this, you can adjust it. If you find that the prices are too high and it's across the board, my suggestion would be using the perform button up at the top here where you can adjust the pricing by a percentage. That is one quick, easy way for you to increase all of the molding markups in your database and enter them in as a percentage. Again, the tip is that if you are thinking that you wanted to put 2% in and you mistyped, then you want to click outside that box to make sure that it says 2%. Or you can just type in the number, but regardless, whichever you are doing, make sure that you click outside the box to see the amount so that you know it's the correct amount before you hit the proceed button. You also have the option of manually changing the amounts that are in here. You can recreate this table, you can eliminate lines if you want, or if you wanted to, you could adjust it just on this one vendor by multiplying it, and basically that's what it does. It's going to multiply it by itself plus, if we were to say 2%, okay, and then that will increase the markup on this supplier by 2%. So it's increased it a margin, just a minor amount. But remember that if you've done that on one record, then you do want to go in and adjust it in the pricing options and defaults. So if you're doing the matrix, your vendor updates are going to be through there and that will update it. But if you are pricing by the markup in the formula field with a set price and the minimum surcharges, you want to use the pricing options and defaults to make sure that your formula is always current and has the latest information. So that if you have changed something in here, you want to make sure that it's changed in the default, because all of the new pricing, all the new molding that's entered in is going to be using this chart if you're using the markups. Okay, moving back to comparing. Now, we did talk about that a little bit before. How do you know if you should be charged using the code table or the length or the joint price that they've supplied? And if you wanted to compare those two numbers together to see what it is that they're suggesting that you would sell it for, and you want to take a look at this chart here, and yet you want to compare it to see what would I be charging by length, take note of one or two of the numbers that are on here, and you can see for 18 United inches, it is $125. So then what we would do is we would go back to the pricing tab, and in order to be able to see the prices here, you're just going to temporarily uncheck that box so that when you go back here, you can actually see that for 8 by 10, it's $129. And so when I'm comparing these together, and I made up a little diagram for you to be able to see that. So going back, I can see that this in my length is actually up $4 above what it was on the matrix chart that they had. But when I look at the matrix chart for the 36 United inches, it's actually higher by about $4 than the one that I have on here. And when I get into the much larger sizes, you can see there's a big difference in the price on some of these higher priced items. So don't take a look at just one or two sizes. Take a look at the sizes that you use the most, all right? But then take a look at the rest of the chart as well. And that's going to give you an idea of the difference between the supplier matrix chart and what you are charging based on length, or if you do have the join wholesale costs, what you're using based on the join. So the big thing is to make sure that you are making sufficient profit so that you can stay in business longer. All right, let's go take a look at the code matrix. If you are using the code matrix and you've decided that this is definitely not the amount that I need to have as a profit, but I am ordering as a join and I need to use the matrix in order to price, this is a 2 times cost. Now, what you can do is that you can change the code tables and you can increase or decrease it. And if we go to the code tables, and if you were using the glass code table, you could do the same thing here, but we would click on the adjust current table by a percentage. And when you do that, it allows you to do the increase. Now, if you are going to be increasing your chart and saying that it's at a 2 times markup right now, and you want it to be perhaps 2.5 markup, then you need to increase the code table. The question is, what's the magic number that you need to use in order to increase that code table? And I'm going to go to this chart here to let you know how do you decide that. So if the retail price on the matrix is 125.52, if I divide that by 2, I'm going to find out what the wholesale cost is on there. If I take that wholesale cost and multiply it by my new markup that I want, I now know what the retail price is that I want to charge the customer. So knowing the retail price that I want and the one that I have, I divide them, taking the one I want divided by the one that I have, and I find out that the markup needs to be 1.25. Now in FrameReady, when you're using that markup, you need to enter it in as 0.25 because it's already going to have the 1 in there. So if I'm increasing the code table, I need to do 0.125. Now, sometimes when you do that, you may find that maybe you've made a mistake and it wasn't exactly the amount that you wanted. You can do a decrease on there as well. Remembering that if you're doing the decrease, going from the price that you have to the price that you want, if you want to put it back, okay? Take that amount, divide it by, take the price that you want, divided by the price that you have, you're going to get 80. The trick on the chart is to enter the difference. So if 1 is the amount and the difference is 80, then you're going to be putting in 0.20 because you want it to be decreased 20%. So that's the information that you need when you're using those increase or decrease on the code tables. You can increase all of the vendor code tables rather than just doing one, because I'm pretty sure you're not going to want to do just one. We're going to go back up to that button I showed you earlier that says perform. And when we want to adjust pricing by a percentage, we're going to use the all vendor code matrix. And this is again where if I wanted to increase it to a 2.5 markup, I'm going to enter in 0.25, which is going to then increase all of the code tables once I click proceed. If I've made a mistake and I've entered in the wrong one, rather than fudging around with the numbers and trying to get it to go back, because it never goes back exactly to the one that the exact same amount, my suggestion would be go back and click on the button to update the vendor codes. That will put you right back to where you were at the very start, and then you can do the increase again to the amount that you want it to be. So this shows you that you have a lot of flexibility in pricing, that you can either use the markup and formula that you have along with the set price, which can be used to add in any shipping costs or additional joining fees that you have. You can also use the minimum and surcharges with that and add that shipping code in down here. And I have entered in one ahead of time. So if I had a shipping code because maybe I'm in a rural area and it's remote and there's some extra shipping that I want to add on specifically to that supplier, then I can add that on to it. The other advantage to you is that even if you have a code pricing and you're using the matrix, you can still add that shipping charge as well on top of the matrix pricing that you have, and it will use the two of them together. And you did see that where it was added in together on this chart. So I had not only the Larson Jewell matrix that I was using, but I also added a shipping code knowing what it was going to cost to ship a join frame to my area. So you can use both of those together. And if you find that when you're on here that any of these prices are not what they want, the code is a great way for you to go ahead and change the amount that's on there right on the fly. And for those people who are using the length retail pricing, if you decide that you too wanted to change pricing on the fly, you could just enter something into that code. And even if you aren't using the matrix, it will change the price that's up here at the top of the screen that the customer is being charged. So lots of flexibility, lots of different options for you. All you need to decide is, which one is the one that you want to use, and then make sure that you are covering your costs and that you are making a good profit so you can stay in business. And that's everything today for pricing molding in Canada. And bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Chrissy.